It's your girl, your host, Jocelyn. Y como siempre, I'm so grateful you are here and you are tuning into this beautiful, inspiring conversation we're about to have with our very special guest, who is a poet, an author, an actor who has worked with brands like Google, So Far Sounds, Lululemon, TEDx, Skims, Etsy, Starbucks, PayPal, TJ Maxx, and more. Arielle Estoria, thank you so much for being here and for, in advance, just this beautiful conversation we're about to have.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we always start these conversations with gratitude. So I'd love to ask you what it is that you currently feel grateful for.
I'm grateful for, I just got off of a call actually with the rest of the women that I'm helping host a yoga retreat for. And so I'm really excited and really grateful for just the space we're creating for whoever comes in a few weeks to Yosemite. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity and that chance. So yeah.
I love that. That sounds really exciting. And hopefully at the end of the conversation, we have some time to talk about the yogic journey, because I too have been impacted by that, and just it's such a beautiful path. But in this conversation, we're essentially going to be fully diving into and expanding on your recently published book, The Unfolding, which is a collection of essays and poems and meditations. And I so gratefully got the opportunity to read through it, and I love it so much. So congratulations on the publishing of this book. It's such a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
On the cover of the book, under the title, The Unfolding, it says here, an invitation to come home to yourself. And I felt inspired to kind of talk about defining home for a bit, because I personally went through, years of like just having this deep longing to feel at home. And for the longest time, I feel like I was looking for home outside of me, because I think when we think of home, we think of like a physical home. But later, I realized that what I was actually looking for is like a state of being within my own self, like the home frequency of feeling safe within my own self, feeling comfortable within my own self, feeling connected to my body. So how was that journey for you in defining home, and how do you define home now?
Well, I think oftentimes I try to think about all the ways that the physical or the material can transcend into a more spiritual and less literal thing. And so I think about the concept, and I talk about the concept of our bodies being a home quite a bit. I think for me in my own personal journey, I had been so outside of my physical body, my physical home, for so long. So I had to use this metaphor or this messaging of a thing I'm coming back to. So like my apartment, like my parents' house, like whatever physical home you connect with or that it's that same returning. It's that coming back after a long day, and the bra is off and where everything is. And I just like have these very tangible moments where I'm like walking around my apartment and I'm just so aware of like, this is my space. Like, this is my home, especially when I'm in the kitchen cooking. Like, there's just such of like a nested and a groundedness that kind of takes over me in that moment. And I've learned to adapt that and to connect that also with my physical body, because I just grew up so disembodied and so disconnected from my physical space, because a lot of what I was told about spirituality and how to connect with God and how not to connect with God, I'd just known and learned how to disconnect, how to not be here. And by here, I mean physically here in our bodies. And so much of my work over the last 30 years has been this constant returning home, returning back to this self, back to this connectedness, back to this being that I feel like is still God-centered and God orchestrated. And so a lot of how I've had to come home to my own body is through that work. So I think there's a way for the physical and the literal to transcend into metaphorical and spiritual. And so that is why I use the idea of home in that way.
I love that so much. In the unfolding, I love, when I was reading through this book, I kind of came to the realization, like, this book is essentially about someone returning not just back home to themselves, but becoming more of their true self. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that really is what the healing journey is. And we're going to talk more about that. But I love that in your book, you broke down what the unfolding journey consists of. So for anyone curious about this journey of divine unfoldment and becoming more of your true self and returning back home to yourself, I feel like this is the book to go to learn more about that. But you broke it down into 5 phases of unfoldment. And I like to share some of just a couple of my favorite lines within each of these phases. And the first phase of the unfolding, you describe as the awakening. Here are a few lines from this part of your book. I wasn't becoming someone entirely new, but rather finally feeling the freedom to step into who I always had been. The awakening, your initial realization that things must change, you must change in order to step into the next phase of becoming. And I love how you must change is italicized there, because it was emphasizing that, the healing journey, the journey of becoming it's less about the things around you changing, and it's more about what's within you and how that's changing. It's more about the internal environment. A couple other lines here. The awakening shatters who you have been or have tried to be, what you have believed, and where you thought you were going, which I think is why the awakening can kind of be a bit difficult to accept, because it can be so shattering sometimes. And lastly, the awakening is also when sleeping parts of who you've always been rise to the surface and demand that you either abandon or become them. And I love that you highlighted that, because when we do awaken and we do have these intuitive gut feelings that things need to change, sometimes those changes are things that we need to let go, but sometimes those changes are things that we need to receive and open ourselves up to welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times we talk about the concept of changing and growth, and we tend to make it as, beautiful. It's oh, you're blooming, you're becoming. And the idea of the unfolding is there's still beauty to it. But I think I specifically wanted to talk about in that intro, the pain that comes with the undoing and the unfolding. It's kind of that the disorienting coming to, if ever taken a middle of the day kind of nap, and it probably for just 30 minutes too long, and you wake up and you're oh, who am I? Where am I? Who's the president? What is going on? And I think a lot of times it's that response, but in that response and in that shifting, knowing that something is, no pun intended, unfolding, knowing that something within us is shifting and growing. And a lot of that awakening was very much so how it was for me, and hoping that it connects and identifies with other people's, or even being able to make word to it. I think reading it and being oh, this is kind of what's happening, within me and around me. And oftentimes I do think that external does affect the internal, but more than often than not, I do think change starts internally. Like most things happen within the interior before it's ever shown in the exterior. And so there's probably so much orbiting and happening within us that we don't even see for a really long time because we've gotten really good at ignoring it. We've gotten really good at, numbing it out. We've gotten really good at just being like, oh, that's not there until it's meeting us in the face. And we're like, oh, there it is, And so how proactive can we be when we start to really do that internal processing? And I'm such an internal processor, probably almost to a fault. So I tend to go internal quite a bit.
Same. And I'm curious to ask you, and I know that you do expand on this in the book a bit, but for you, when you were going through your awakening, and this book, if I'm not mistaken, really expresses like a very recent unfoldment that you've experienced in your life just in the past couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here when we were talking about, the part where you express that when you experience the awakening, what comes to the surface is asking you to either, abandon something or someone or become something or someone. What was the calling for you when you were experiencing the awakening? Did you feel more called to abandon, or did you feel more called to become?
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the times, like it's both, because in the abandoning, I think there is a becoming.
Yeah.
But what did that consist of for
I
you?
think that language would actually be and abandon something to become something. Not an if or, but more so an and. You do have to abandon something or some part of yourself in order to become. And for me in that moment, it was just choosing, I gotta abandon this people pleasing, this child who is constantly in tune and aware of other people's emotions and feelings and wants and needs and desires, sometimes so much to a fault that it hinders my ability to tap into my own wants and needs, emotions and desires, and abandoning this need to people please. A lot of those decisions for me in my unfolding was choosing to marry the person I knew fully in my heart was my person. I had known since the first day I had met him that he was my person, and so much of the language that countered that was what I had to abandon. Am I going to listen to my own voice, or am I going to just trust the really loud voices of other people? And those voices not just being voices and opinions, but also fears that I had to sift through and realize these are not mine. And while we can be empathetic and connected to people, I do think I had to learn how to not carry people's everything, as I tend to be a very empathetic and so empathetic. I call myself a sponge. I can walk into a room and I just soak up just all the emotions, all the varying things that are happening, and then having to sift through my own insecurity of does everyone hate me? Tends to be my own internal dilemma. But a lot of that, there was a lot of abandoning and becoming, abandoning this faith and spirituality that disconnected me from my body, that disconnected me from my Blackness, that disconnected me from my femininity, and choosing to become interconnected, interdisciplined, embodied, and faith-oriented. And so there was a lot of shedding or abandoning in order to become, which is why I use the term unfolding. It's this literal peeling back of these layers of these petals that don't serve us, that don't contribute to where we're going and who we're becoming, and finding the permission and the space to release those mindsets, those perspectives, those mentalities, those personalities, and stepping into this more full, whole, and freed person. And it doesn't mean we, don't we lose parts of ourselves only to gain full parts of ourselves is really what it is. Yeah.
I love that. And just to touch on like people pleasing, I feel like that if you are a people pleaser and if you do go about years and years, especially if it's most of your life, just like prioritizing pleasing others and meeting others' needs and fulfilling other people's desires, you just progressively abandon your own self. And at a point, you even forget who your true self even is, because you've like gotten to know yourself as what everyone else desires you to be. And yeah, I just feel like people pleasing can be so distancing in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately when we people please, we have this natural need then to numb, to ignore parts of us in that moment, because we're reacting according to them. We're not reacting according to ourselves. And I think a lot of time as women and female identifying people, we've kind of been conditioned and made to just have that be our natural response and our natural reaction, to people please, to make sure everyone's okay, to be the maternally connected one, so that means a lot of times like I suffer for the sake of other people's thriving. I don't think I believe anymore that there is a need for anyone to suffer in order for others to thrive. I think the math ain't mathing. I do think we need to release that mindset of that if I'm suffering, then everyone else is okay. But like, no, it is not true. If you're not thriving, then no one around you is truly thriving. And really being able to like bring that back into a mindset and a discipline. And like I watch my mom, and there are moments where I'm like, no, but like if you're not okay, like none of us are okay, so like we need you to be okay, and not just like be okay so that we can be okay, not in an authentic and fake sense either, but like I genuinely want you to be your best self, because that vice versa allows me to walk into be my best self. And I think as the oldest child and just like of a big family, that's like so much have been my desire as an oldest child in my 30s of like, no, I like fully want my parents to thrive and be their best versions of themselves, because that teaches us even more so now that we can do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think another thing that I feel called to highlight here as we talk about the abandoning to become, specifically with this phase of awakening, and maybe it gets into the second phase of the eclipsing that you speak of, which I interpreted as shadow work. But I think something that's important when we do experience awakening is that sometimes we'll know what we're being pulled from, but we don't fully have the clarity of what we're being pulled towards yet. Like we don't need to have all the answers of like, I'm abandoning this so I can become this. Sometimes we only have the knowing in the now moment of what we need to let go of. And as we do the letting go, we'll begin to receive the downloads and the clarity of, okay, I needed to let this go so that I can receive this, so that I can become this.
Yeah. I think of it like there's two ways to journey. There's a way of like packing down to the list, having the map, having all the stops you're going to make before you get to your destination. There's this site, there's that site, there's this restaurant in this city that we're going to stop at, right? There's this really thorough, planned out way of journeying. And then there's the call to just get in the car and drive. And I think so much of my life has been the call to just get in the car and drive. And it's not your job to know where you're going, but when you do get there, you'll know. You know, like in the pandemic and in a lot of lockdown, that was like one of the things my partner and I did a lot. We just got in the car and we just be like, all right, we'd be in San Diego, we'd be in Pismo Beach. Like most times we drove to the water, because that's just such a like a spiritual connected home space for us is beach and being by water. And he loves the mountains and things like that. So we would just get in the car and we would just drive, and it would come to us on the way there. Like, oh, we should go to this taco place and get like a breakfast burrito and then go to this lookout spot. But we would know that within 30 minutes of getting there. And so I do think there's two ways to journey, not just physically road trip and travel, but to journey in life. Is one very succinct, planned out. And that's great. You'll know where you're going. You'll know where you're stopping when you get there. And then there's just those moments where we're just called to get in the car. And that's the only thing we know in that moment, and get and drive.
I love that example and imagery. And I think too that sometimes we'll have those seasons where it is just like get in the car and go. And then we'll have other seasons in life where everything is a bit more planned out and we do have a bit more certainty. And I think both of them are just so normal to experience. So normal to experience.
Yeah.
Here we are, we're unfolding. And I just want to say, I just feel like life is just a continuous unfoldment.
Absolutely.
We're just constantly in this state of transition and becoming.
Every single day. I talk about how I think it's like every 30 seconds to like a minute, our physical cells are changing. Like barely a minute. We are internally and cellularly being different people in every single moment. And when we think about that, like I just find there's so much grace for like our inability to be one way in the morning and then to be an entirely different way in the afternoon. It's like, do you know, like your physical cells are not the same person that you were an hour ago? And so like being able to like obviously find groundedness, find this deep sureness and awareness, while also leaving room and giving space for the fact that you will not be the same person. And I think we need to not be the same people. I think half of our world and the systems that exist in the world, if they didn't change, we would be in very drastically different positions as a society and as a humanity. And so allowing that permission and that grace for ourselves, for our partners, for our friendships. Like, I love the permission to be like, girl, I am so sorry I haven't talked to you in this many weeks, and this hasn't been happening, and this isn't happening. And then we just like reconnect because we know that we like are living lives and growing and changing, evolving. And I think there's so much patience and so much more love for ourselves and for each other when we extend that grace and that space to be like, okay, who am I encountering in this moment? Versus like holding people to the versions of them that we've known. And I think that's a lot of the times the discomfort of growing. It's not that we don't want to, but oftentimes that people won't allow us to, that it's really scary to, that we'll lose people if we're different because we're less familiar to them. And that really sucks. I think if we found more permission to be like so gracious and open with each other of like, okay, who am I meeting today? And does that person connect and align with who I am today? And that being what fuels, our relationships and our ability to show up in this world.
Yeah, I feel like all of that also just applies towards our own self and allowing our own self to like lean into the unfamiliarity of being renewed. And
right.
I feel like, this life being this constant state of becoming and transition, like it is a constant state of renewal. And like you mentioned, like our body is literally renewing itself in every moment. And we see examples of this like everywhere in nature outside of us too. So it is in our nature to constantly renew. And it's so important that, yes, to your perspective, it can be very difficult for others to accept us in our changes. But I think there's also this great difficulty that all of us have had individually in us being unable to allow ourselves to change, and being afraid of, if we do allow ourselves to renew, if we do allow ourselves to let go and become this, whatever this next version of me will be, that's going to be unfamiliar. And what else is that going to make me change in my life? So awakening leads into the eclipsing. And here are three of like my favorite lines. Sometimes during the eclipsing, you will notice when the shadows being cast over you are not from your own darkness, but shadows that belong to others. I also was showing those who had once known me that there were parts of me that were just fully coming into the light. They do not show you that in the same moment you are saying yes to one thing, you could be dismantling the structure of something else. All of these were like just such bars to me. They're so good. And I want to expand on a couple here. I feel like the first two actually touch on what we were just talking about, in regards to people pleasing and others like placing these expectations on us. I feel like that's a reflection of like their own insecurities being projected onto us, and us like in a way accepting their shadows as our own.
Right.
And also when we were talking about, you know, the fears that can come with allowing ourselves to change and the unfamiliarity that comes with that, you know, you sharing here that, you know, you were showing the people around you who had known that past version of you that you were letting go of, that you were just now, while you're still undergoing this process, you're starting to show these like new aspects of yourself that are just coming to the surface. And as you're getting to know them yourself, other people are getting to know them too. And that can be kind of like an awkward phase in the becoming, and you know, in your description here in the eclipsing. What did that awkwardness look like for you?
Well, I think a lot of it is especially within the context of like not being around the people I grew up with. I don't live where I grew up. You know, I've been in LA for like 13 years. So I realized that what actually was happening was I had already changed. I had already been being this version of myself around everyone in my immediate circles, you know, like for the last few years. And I wasn't saying, you know, all of the things that I was like kind of exploring and learning out loud, but with people who knew me, with my close circle, with my friends, all that, none of that was like new information to people. They're like, okay, yeah, this is Ari, you know, that's just what it is. And so I think I didn't realize how much I had code switched within my family dynamic when I started to merge the two versions of myself. I was like, oh, I definitely resort back to, you know, Ari who keeps everyone okay. Ari who makes sure like she kind of bites her tongue so that it doesn't rock the boat or add. Whereas I wasn't so aware or hinged in that way in every other space. And so a lot of that for me was realizing like, oh, it wasn't until that collided where I was like, oh, I've changed, you know, like, because you're kind of used to it for the most part. When it comes to yourself, they're just everyday practices and everything normalities until people are like, that's not like who you're acting brand new, right? It's like that mentality of like, why are you acting brand new? You're like, oh, I am actually, but I've been this way. Either you're just now noticing or I'm finding more freedom to fully be that, and more safety to fully be that. And so I noticed the spaces that allowed me to fully tap into that version of myself and how much permission was there. And that was one of the things that, that my partner and I had to work on, of just like, you switch, you come back an entirely different person. And it's not that I'm an entirely different person, but that's the person I was, that I know people are comfortable with, and I know how to chameleon back into her to people please. Like we talk about people pleasing in a sense of like, oh yeah, fine, whatever, I'll have sushi too, even though you fully want a burrito. But we don't talk about the other side of it, where we're like, no, I become a people pleased person, that version of a person, because I know it makes other people feel safe and feel okay and feel comfortable. And then I find other spaces where I can breathe, where I can exhale and actually just like take that skin off, that actually doesn't fit anymore, and it hasn't fit in a long time.
Yes. And on the note of, when people start feeling like, oh, you're acting brand new, like, who is this person? I feel like it's important to highlight that in this divine unfoldment of us becoming more of who we truly are through the healing and awakening journey, it's less that like our changes, it's less that we're becoming more of someone we're not. And it's more that these changes are us becoming more of who we truly are.
Without all the strings, without all the conditioning, without all of the being told. There's I can't remember Joe Sexton, actually, she's an author, writer, and mentor for me in the last few years. And she has this book called The Dream of You. And she asks the question in it, who were you before you were told who to be? There's versions of us that have existed without the chains, without the assumptions, without the conditions, without the strings. And I think that is ultimately who we find ourselves coming back to. Like I love watching women in their 60s and 70s who are just like, and you just watch them and you're like, they just say whatever they want. And it's like, at first you're like, okay, like lady, chill. Like my grandma's just wiling out. But is she? Or is she just honest? Like, is she just being herself? And I think I love watching women who get older, specifically because I watch them so fully come into themselves. I watch them so fully. Like I was on set with this woman who's like, has like 6 kids who are like close to my age. And she's like in her 70s almost, and just a whole bad deed, like down to the outfits, down to the hair. Like she was just living. And there's something about watching women get older result back to those versions of themselves that they have always been, and now have found the full permission to be them and become them. And I hope for us and in our generation, and part of the work that I want to do is that we get there a little sooner, that we don't have to be close to like the end where we're like, okay, I don't care anymore. Like I want to not care, but kind of, I want to kind of not care, or let a lot of that go now, so that when I'm older and having kids, that I start to show them that immediately what it means that you can show up as your fullest self. And the versions and the spaces that don't allow you to do that are not spaces where you're able to grow and thrive. And you want to go where you can grow and thrive.
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat that prompt, that question from that book?
Yeah. So the book is The Dream of You by Joe Sexton. And she says, who were you before you were told who to be?
Right.
Which is just such a powerful question.
I love it. And something that I want to bring up here is that, some people listening or who may be questioning, like, am I someone who people told me to be? Or am I truly who I am? And it's like, but no one's really ever told me who to be. And I think what's important is that people, it's not that people are literally telling you like, you need to be this. And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes we do grow up being told by our parents or family members or whoever we're surrounded by that you need to be this. So sometimes it can be that specific, but a lot of the times it's actually very subtle. And it happens like in our childhood when we're not really fully realizing that that's what the people around us are doing.
Most times it's a lot more, most times it's very, not passive aggressive, but very microaggression. And mostly the intent is not always meant to be. The intent is to protect a lot of times, telling girls to make themselves small, to not be to not be sexually outward or appealing or whatever. All that is like in hopes of like, we've created these like porcelain doll of human beings because of how other people react to our bodies and how we show up in the world, not because we aren't deserving of taking it fully, of wearing the clothes that we feel good in and confident in without having to worry about, well, how is this going to make me perceived? Am I putting myself in danger? Like if that, even that thread alone is a lot to unpack of how we're even told to dress, to physically show up in this world as women and female identifying people, just because of the dangers in which takes place, because we know how to show up and fully be in our bodies and in the world. And so even that, like, it may not have been as straightforward or as direct because there was underlying conditioning within that. So if we think about not the things that we were told, and some of us have other traumas that are very specific, like you're going to eat that second piece of cake, like you're going to wear that out. Like we have all these. I had a moment what is time anymore? I always say a few weeks ago, and it's like my husband's like, that was last year. So I have no concept of time really. But we'll say a few months ago, I had to put on an outfit and we were just going for a walk. Like it wasn't even anything crazy. I wasn't going, but I'm just like hyper conscious of like how I'm perceived, down to the T. And so we're going for a walk. I was like, oh, is this like too loud? And he was like, what? And I was like, is this outfit like too loud? And he was like, according to who? And I was like, according to who? Where did I get that from? Like, where did I get that's too loud? I was told that. There were outfits where I'm like, you're wearing that out, like that's kind of loud, or who are you trying to draw attention to, or whatever, or like who are you dressing for? Or like even all that language are just like subtle things that we've been told that have been put in our reservoir of thought and processing. And now we just funnel it through so much that we think it's ours, but it wasn't. That was planted there. And we just became very familiar with it and just started to sift through it all and call it our own until we realized, that wasn't mine. I didn't put that there. And just like, I think that could be an exercise in itself of just going through all the things you were told and what were you not told, but you processed it in a certain way. You picked up on it and interpreted that way, and it hindered you from existing in a certain way or existing fully.
I feel like one of the biggest takeaways here from what you shared is that sometimes it's not just the people around us telling us who to be, but societally and culturally, us being told who to be, and equally as harmful as being told who not to be as well. Let's take a moment. Let's take a breather from our conversation with Arielle and talk about our partner, Athletic Greens, who supports this podcast and introduced me to one of my all-time favorite wellness products that I am so grateful to introduce you to because I so stand by it. My body, mind, and spirit all absolutely love this product. And the product that I'm talking about is AG1. With one scoop of AG1, you are absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source ingredients, probiotics, and adaptogens that support your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, aging, all the things. I take one scoop. I take this one really yummy scoop, and it really is so yummy every single morning when I get home from the gym and before I have breakfast. And it just feels so refreshing. It feels like the perfect way to start the day, to replenish and nourish my body with this one scoop that has all this deliciousness and greatness and nutritiousness that our bodies, minds, and spirits truly need to function optimally. And I just love that it's lifestyle friendly. Your girl is basically vegan. And I just absolutely have to be dairy free. I love that it's also friendly for those who are keto lifestyle, paleo, vegan, gluten free. This also contains less than 1 gram of sugar. It has no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything. It's so wild how many wellness products actually have like chemicals and artificial ingredients that just makes no sense. But AG1 has none of that nastiness. And as I mentioned, it actually tastes really good. It tastes like a tropical smoothie somehow, and you're literally just mixing 1 scoop with a cup of water every day. That's it. And it costs you less than $3 a day, y'all. It's such a good investment. And I don't know about you, but I'm a big reviews girl, and Athletic Greens literally has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by professional athletes, trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. So y'all, right now is the time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Again, it's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills, supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/SWG. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/SWG to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. I have left a link in the description below for your convenience. Y'all, I'm telling you, look into it. Such a good investment. Now, without further ado, let's get back into this beautiful conversation with Arielle. This last sentence that I shared here, where you were talking about saying yes to one thing is saying no, or is dismantling another thing, was so good. And if I'm not mistaken, you were specifically referring to your experience of the dismantling that came with you saying yes to your wedding engagement. Mm-hmm. Could you share a bit more about the yes and the dismantling that came with the yes?
Yeah, I think when I think about it now, a lot of it just has to do with being the oldest child and doing a lot of these things first. And what I like to say as generational breaking, which is a lot of times what we end up doing when we make decisions that kind of veer off in a different direction than the norm or than our families or than what we've seen it, as an example to us. And so for me, it was, okay, I'm going to choose to marry who I think is for me. I'm going to choose to say yes to this person that I know I can build a beautiful life with. I'm going to say yes to this person whose faith and how they interpret God looks a little different, than what I've been told to look for, or that that I even have a choice to love or to receive. I'm going to say yes to, this person because I'm building the life with them, and it breaking a lot of that enmeshment that happens with a lot of families of color, of just like, no, we do become our own version, our own selves, and step into these family units that we're creating. And now our families are extensions of those families. But, you can't really tell that to families that are so close-knit and so connected. And it's just like that reminder of like, this doesn't break this, but it does extend it. It does expand it. And that doesn't mean that it's going to look the same. And that's okay. I think there should be growth. You should be building off of things. And so, yeah, it's very different, just even orchestrating, being married and like seeing my sisters do things. And I'm like, oh, I still want to do that. I want to still go to that, but it's still just a little bit more work of like talking with my husband and like planning it out and things like that. Which it's just a different rhythm of life. It's just a different system, and having to implement that, and be the first to implement that. I'm just like, oh, I wish I had another older sister who did all that so that we could watch the example. But unfortunately it had to be me, which reminds me of Lizzo's, I think it was her, can't remember if it was a Grammys or Emmy speech. And she talks about, like I would watch TV and I would watch these performers and I'd be like, oh, like where are the examples? Where are the ones who look like me? And then eventually she says it had to be me in order for those examples to be there, in order for that representation to be there. And unfortunately, this was fortunate that was pretty similar in this situation of like, I just want someone else to pave the way. And it's like, yeah, but sorry, babe, you got to be the one to do it. And it's fun. I like watching at least how that has unfolded now, of just being able to give my sisters the permission to trust themselves, to be who it is that they desire to be with, and not be with this like cookie cutter of like, this is what you can marry, this is who you can be with. And it's a house full of women. So that's its own journey.
Well, I'm proud of you for being the example and leading the way. Takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the first phase, the awakening, the second phase, the eclipsing. Then we get into the mending phase of the unfoldment.
Yeah.
You wrote here, when we walk through the eclipsing, we are surrounded by the broken pieces of what once was in our life and our identity. The mending allows us to bring those pieces back together. I feel like a lot of your mending, at least a lot of what you shared in your book in regards to this phase, was in relation to your relationship with God. You wrote, I had associated the voice of God with the voice of those closest to me. I feel like so many people can relate to that. Tell us a bit more about your mending process.
I talk about the Japanese art of kintsugi in the mending process, and it's taking broken clay pieces and molding it with this like gold glue or gel. And so when you see the final pieces, you still see where they were cracked, where they were pieced, where they were broken, but it's like combined and pieced together still in this like full whole piece with this stunning like gold shimmy metallic glue. And I love that because you still see where it was pieced. You still see what it had to go through in order to become this really beautiful pot or cup or whatever it is that is made with the art of kintsugi. And I think so much of my own mending was a lot of that. It was taking pieces where I'm like, no, I still love being in a church, setting. But I also love having a Sunday where my church and my Sabbath can be my bed, where I can be on my yoga mat and still feel like I'm connecting with God, and still feel like I'm having a sermon, if you will. I had to like find these other, more free and more permissible ways to connect with God outside of four walls, that all my friends and their queerness and their identity was also included in the conversation. That like I said earlier, that my blackness, that my femininity was also included in my spirituality. And so it was like, okay, I'm breaking some of these pieces, spaces that are spiritual but not social justice oriented. I'm leaving that, and I'm picking up, this, and then I'm leaving that, and then I'm picking up this. I'm leaving that, and I'm like, ooh, but I still love to listen to oceans every once in a while. So I'm picking that back up too, you know, and like finding these things where I get to choose now what this clay pot, what this piece is that I'm holding and that I'm creating, and that God is not any less in this, you know, just because I'm choosing. And I think a lot of what I was told is like, you because you're choosing it, because it's your decision, that it's not God oriented. And I'm like, I don't think that works. And the way that I've lived and that I've orchestrated, I think that God is so much in the decisions, and that if I feel like I'm God led and God orchestrated, then it's almost just as instinctual as what's happening in my brain and what's happening in my head. And then there are moments where I'm like, you're wilding out. And I'm very aware of those moments, you know, and I can come back to what's true and what's good. But I ultimately think if it's not calling me to wholeness, if it's not calling me to fullness, if it's not calling me to freedom, then it wasn't God. And I had to sift through what those were, in growing up in, you know, as a pastor's kid, and growing up as a woman in a Baptist space where it's like you're not you're not connected to divinity, so you can't hear from God. I had to like undo a lot of that stuff and sift through like, oh, is this a male figure or is this actually the voice of God in my head? And I think when we live in this, Diana Butler Bass talks about this very vertical elevator way of experiencing God, that only a select few are able to get into the elevator, connect with God, bring that information back down, and then give it to everyone, versus it being a very linear way of experiencing spirituality and divinity. Is that no, God is on the line with all of us. Everyone can access God, everyone can experience God. And it's not this, you know, being brought down and only for the select few, and only interpreted through a male view and male gaze. One of my favorite things lately has been listening and experiencing feminist theology, where it's like it just paints a whole different picture and it puts us back in the story. And so much of my mending is like, how do I fit into the story that I've been told? And what does that look like for me now? Yeah.
It seems to me that the mending phase is a lot of asking yourself questions and getting really clear on like what your values are, what your belief system is as this truer version of yourself. I feel like it is really important to have that moment with yourself of like, okay, I've just gone through so much change. I'm going through so much transition and transformation in my life. I'm more of my true self. Now let me check in with like my values as this truer version of me. Let me check in with what my belief system is. And for you have some even questions here that you were asking yourself. Was God loving or judging? Was God speaking guilt or shame over me? What was God's intention? Does God dictate or does God guide in love? And it's in asking yourself those questions that you're then able to do the mending that you feel feels the most authentic to you.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm a very internal processor. So that's why I put, you know, reflection questions and things like that at the end of each chapter, each, you know, phase as well, because I think if we're not asking ourselves those questions, if we're not going there, you know, like I think we miss a lot. And I was talking to a friend yesterday. She's my voice memo friend. We like voice memo each other all the time. And she like usually like apologizes for like sending such long ones. And I was like, don't apologize. Like, feel free to just be like, hey, long one's coming in, you know, and like, I will find the time to like listen and be intentional with it. And I think a lot of that is just the permission to do the same. Like sometimes we just got to send some some voice memos. And most times we do it just to hear ourselves out loud. I think I talk to myself a lot and out loud, you know, because I need to hear it sometimes, which is why I write. I write because I need to see it, or I need to hear it back to me. And so being able to have that process of just like, what do I want? You know, I remember the first time, you know, being really, truly, genuinely asked that. And I was like, do I ask myself that question? What do I want? Or do I ask myself, like, how is so going to respond? How am I going to be perceived in this? How is this going to look to other people? does that change my answer then when I asked myself the first time, what is it that you want? What is it that you actually want? Who is it that you want to be? And being able to ask those questions without those, like what we talked about earlier, those conditioned strings, those perceived, thoughts. Well, and if it would be different, then I think maybe we got to assess that a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm. And if we can't answer the question and don't know how to answer, like, why I really don't know what I truly desire, then I think then there's some exploration to do, but still some eclipsing to do. Like there's still more of that shedding, that letting go that you need to do so that you can gain that clarity.
Absolutely.
Because at that point, the voices of other people are being louder than your own.
Which happens a lot and so quickly. So it's like, again, that constant coming back home to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Second to last phase of the unfolding is the illuminating, which is letting the light in and giving yourself permission. And this is actually something that has been on my mind a lot, is like, what am I gifting myself the permission to be now and to do? Some of the lines that I would like to share here from this phase. Illuminating is the phase of letting the light in. The illuminating is a beautiful space where you can bask in the freedom of finding home and accepting yourself and who you are in this present moment. I had to be confident in the deepest part of my being that choosing the love of my whole life was worth it. The illuminating is also a space of revealing new perspective, fresh eyes, and new lights. And lastly, you will wonder if all that you have fought for and said yes to could really be as marvelous and specifically for you as it feels. This is such an important part, in my opinion, of the becoming journey, is allowing yourself and giving yourself the permission to enjoy the fruits of your labor, if you will, and really giving yourself the permission to fully step into the light of who you've become.
Yeah, I noticed as I had sifted through, the causing the tension, for shifting in the ways that I shifted and people having to catch up and get familiar, for making the decision I was making and standing by it and letting others, figure out either how to get there or choose to not, once I had done all of that, once I had awakened to, eclipsed, shed a light on all of it, mended it, it was like, oh, this is lovely, like this. I remember like walking the Rose Bowl, which is like this walking path or loop that's near where I live. And I was walking with a friend and I'm like, sometimes I feel like, I didn't know life could get this good. I didn't know life could be this beautiful, this rich, saying yes to the things that I knew in my heart and soul. I think I was only told, again, when you trust yourself, like it's not good, like nothing good could come of it. But I feel the most connected with God than I've ever felt. I felt so grounded in who I was and where I was. I felt so rich in my relationship and my ability to communicate and my ability to set boundaries. I was like, this is lovely, and I was like, but I feel like there was a catch, but I feel like something's still going to come up. And so it was like being able, and I still sometimes have those moments, my husband and I, we just hit 3 years, a week or 2 weeks ago, married. And it still feels, I'm like, when are we going to get out of this space where I like love you or whatever, because we heard so many things about being married and it gets so hard and and I think eventually, we'll have challenges like all good relationships do. But at the same time, I still wake up and I'm like, I just love who I'm next to. And I think I was told for so long that those things wouldn't exist, especially in the first years of being married. And we have it and we feel very lucky. We also had a whole pandemic to really deepen our roots as a couple and as individuals. And so we're really weirdly thankful for that. but yeah, it's those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, look how beautiful this is. And it's, not to the point where we're not grounded and that things are still hard. But I talk about this ability to have yes, and that there can be grief, that there can be discomfort, that there can be these painful things while also holding beauty, while also holding deep breaths, while also holding peace, while also holding freedom. I think there has to be room and nuance for both of those things to exist, sometimes in the same breath.
Yeah. And I feel like this kind of touches on this last quotable here that you shared, where you said, I don't have to hold on to this anxiety, fear, sadness, grief anymore. I can make room for the joy here too. And I think that's one of the most profound permissions we can give ourselves, especially when we are in the midst of healing, in the midst of change, is like, I can allow myself, I deserve to allow myself to be joyful. Like, I think it is important for us to have that. I don't know if stern is the right word, but for us to be actively reminding ourselves that we don't have to hold on to the past or to the challenges that may have come up in this journey of becoming, and that we can enjoy what we've become, regardless of what may have come up on the way there.
Right, absolutely. And I think that we can enjoy. I think we experience enough in the shifting, enough in the eclipsing, that we are deserving of a joy here. Like, we're deserving of things to be full and rich. I think if we think of anything, even biblical, or that, God never made these promises that only ended in pain. They were always for richness. They were always for getting to the land of milk and honey. And I think we lost a lot of that in life now, because we're so fashioned and focused on like, well, have nothing good can be here because this is not heaven. But I do think there's a lot of moments where we miss heaven here, and I think some of that, it plays into that mentality of like, no, this is good, this is rich, this is heaven here. And I don't think we miss out on goals and intentions of loving people well if we do that.
Honestly, I'm someone that has come to believe that heaven really does actually exist on earth. And there are so many examples of beauty all around us. And even the simple fact that we have access to like feeling love, like how is that not heavenly? And how is that not proof that we can experience heaven on earth?
Yeah, that feeling loved, like nature, like if you've ever been to a beautiful place and you're just like, just captivated, like anytime we get like goosebumps, I say that like that's an entrance into the thin space. It's where the physical and the spiritual really collide. So anytime you experience that like goosebump moment, I think that is literally an invitation where heaven is here, and it's like, and our bodies are responding to it. I think it's just so beautiful and so much more layered, than we've been made to believe or to think.
Yes. So lastly, the last phase of the unfolding, we've awakened, we've eclipsed, we've mended, we've illuminated, and now we are in the returning. And what I understood here from what you've shared in the returning is that this is really where we are integrating. You shared here that for you, the returning was being reunited with your sanity. It meant that you trusted yourself again. You trusted your decisions, your discernment, and your intuition. Tell us a bit about that returning, that integration, and if it is an integration, or if you would describe it as something more beyond that.
Well, even just to build off of what we were just saying of like, making these decisions and getting to these parts of life that you're like, I almost missed out on this. Like I almost didn't say yes to this. And I think a lot of this, this returning space was that, like, look where trusting not just myself, but trusting something in me. Look where that took me. Look where that got me. I think about, my career and the decisions that I've made over the last 8 or so years, to be where I'm at as a writer and as a poet and as an author and an actor. And I'm like, look what God did, like, but also like through you, And so I think a lot of times, we don't have our autonomy in this stuff, in the decisions we're making. We're just, I give it all to God, but like, you can't just give God a stagnant vessel to work with. You have to be something to work through and to work with. And so I think ultimately it's coming to that reality of, like, I'm part of this too. I can trust myself. I've been given orchestration and direction. I've been given gifts and talents. I've been given the ability to say yes to really life-giving things, not just for myself, but for other people. And ultimately that was what that was coming back to. And it was almost like a full circle, because I had already been there. But I was continuous being told, you can't trust that, or you're far from this. And so I funneled and I operated using those lives and using those realities, and then I was able to come back to, like, no, do you see how far you've come? Do you see how far God has brought you? That's not with your involvement, and with your permission and with your autonomy in this. And so I'm really coming back to that space. And again, it's that returning home. Like I said, you know where all the plants are, where the cozy part of your couch is, the sweatpants that are just gonna, like, just like you slip them on and it's just ease and comfort. Like, that's what we're returning back to. And those moments where you don't have to hide or bite your tongue or to be less of yourself in order to be seen, loved, and reminded that you're worthy.
Yes. I love that. And, as I shared earlier, how I just believe that life is just like a constant unfoldment, and this journey of becoming is eternal. I do want to just let it be known to everyone listening that, it's not a linear journey. And I do love that in your book, you did break it down in such a way where it is digestible, but nevertheless, it's never really linear. And when, we may be experiencing multiple phases at once. And when we do come to this last phase of integration returning, we will experience again another awakening, because we are meant to be in this constant state of renewal, like we just talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Lastly, I just want to ask you if there's a part of the book that you feel hasn't been talked about enough, because we shared a lot here on, the phases of the unfolding. But is there something that you feel from all the conversations you've had amidst the publishing of this book that you just feel like, but we haven't talked about this?
No, I feel like we hit all the pockets. I think if I say anything, I say, like, ultimately, this has been like a 4 year process now of me writing the book, or getting the book deal, writing the book, experiencing all these things. And I say, like, at this present moment, I would be writing a whole different book. I would be writing a whole different unfolded, conversation, because that served for that moment, and now it would probably be a whole different unfolding that would serve into this moment. And so I think that's, if anything, I it's not that I don't hold dear what was written, because all of it was true and necessary for the moment I wrote it, and hopefully connects and applies where people are now. And now I'm already in a space of writing the unfolding again, or the unfolding post. I think that just goes into what you're saying about it not being linear, that it being very constant and continuous, and to give grace through it all. Yeah.
Beautiful. And just want to encourage people, if any part of this conversation really just piqued your curiosity, definitely purchase a copy of The Unfolding.
Yes.
It really is such a personal book. And I'm sure this book also assisted you in your healing process and in your unfoldment. And it's such a beautiful, little capsule for you to look back on and remember this part of your life, which was so significant. So thank you for sharing all of that. We didn't even get into the poems and meditations that you have in there. So it really is such a great book. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Before we get into the final 5, which are just 5 quick fill in the blanks, I want to hold space for you in the case that you feel inspired to share anything. If not, no worries.
No, please get the book. There's an audio version if you're listening to it, listening to this, and my voice is not awful to you. You can get the audiobook version, but I do say get the physical because I think it is very pretty, and there's just different elements to the physical as well. But yeah.
Beautiful. So the final 5 are just 5 fill in the blanks. You can fill it in with one word or more than one word. It's up to you and what your heart desires.
Okay, great.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I am grateful to become
the version of myself that's meant to exist right now.
I love that. I am grateful to heal.
The parts of me that I thought were too unworthy to heal.
I am grateful to feel.
Everything.
I love that. I am grateful to release.
It doesn't serve where I'm going.
I love that. And I am grateful to embody.
Connectedness.
Beautiful. I love that so much. And I so appreciate our conversation. Thank you so much, Arielle, for being here and for birthing this book and for walking us through the phases of the unfolding. This really is such a beautiful conversation on just the journey of becoming. And yeah, I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me again.